Imagine being lost at sea, being so helpless and vulnerable in such a volatile environment, home to countless predators lurking in the unseen depths, being at the absolute mercy of nature. The situation two fishermen, José Alvarenga and Ezequiel Cordoba, found themselves in was far from imaginary, and it lasted 438 days. How could anyone possibly survive hundreds of days in such a nightmare situation? Maybe only a Hollywood screenwriter could come up with such an extraordinary tale. Classic films like Castaway, The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, and Alfred Hitchcock's highly regarded Lifeboat tell gripping stories of survival against the odds that capture the imagination. This true story of José Alvarenga and Ezequiel Cordoba is as real as it gets, and once again shows that fact can be far stranger than fiction. Picture yourself stuck in the middle of the largest and deepest of Earth's 5 oceanic divisions. You would have a pretty much non-existent chance of survival. Would you eventually just give up? Or would you try to keep strong and fight against almost certain doom? Maybe it's easy to sit there right now and say what you would do in this situation, one way or the other, and hopefully it's something you'll never have to face. But if you did, would the thought of your loved ones being tormented by the thought of never really knowing what became of you be enough to keep your will to live strong enough to keep you going? If you were someone of faith, would you put your life in God's hands, or make a pact with the devil to defeat the sea demons? It all began in the early hours of November 17th, 2012, a day like any other. Experienced fisherman José Salvador Alvarenga and young Ezequiel Cordoba departed together on a tiny boat from the fishing village of Costa Azul on the Mexican Pacific coast. Originally from El Salvador, José was a hard-drinking, womanizing lone wolf who had abandoned his girlfriend and daughter and went to Mexico to become a fisherman. He was desperate to earn money and feed his vices, so even a severe storm warning wasn't enough to keep him away from his work that fateful day. His usual partner, Ray Perez, had been arrested the night before, so Alvarenga had asked 23-year-old Cordoba to join him, and the young man was eager to learn the trade. The twist of fate that saw Perez arrested ironically saved him from the terrible odyssey that his partner and new colleague were about to embark on. As Alvarenga and Cordoba started their day's work fishing, the unpredictable north wind, El Norte, reached the coast, accompanied by powerful thunders, and soon turned the sea into a raging whirlpool. The fierce storm was threatening to sink the boat, so out of desperation the two fishermen dumped everything they had caught and most of their equipment overboard to reduce their weight. As the unusually strong wind started to push their boat back out towards the ocean, their motor broke down. In their panic, they quickly reported their position to their boss, but their battery suddenly died and the two fishermen slowly disappeared into the void. Trapped on their boat, they were gradually pushed back further and further into the vastness of the Pacific. The mountains in the horizon disappeared forever, and a deep sense of dread sank in. Back on land, their boss organized a search for them which lasted days, but they eventually had to give up. Through desperation, the two castaways summoned their survival instincts and soon became expert scavengers, living on raw fish, turtle's blood, and even dead seagulls plucked from the sea. They grabbed plastic bottles that they had found floating around and used them to collect rainwater for drinking. During long periods of no rain, they were forced to mostly drink their own urine. It's a very grim fate, surviving day to day on a tiny boat in the middle of Earth's vastest ocean, with only one other person to talk to. How long could they hold on to their sanity in this floating prison? Alvarenga's strong desire to reunite with his daughter inspired his will to live. It was all he needed to gather every ounce of his mental and physical strengths to stay alive. Sadly, Cordoba gave up the will to live after 16 grueling weeks. He became sick from all of the raw food and gave up eating, eventually starving to death after losing more than half his body weight. The bleak details of his story reveal that after Cordoba died, Alvarenga laid him down on his side at the far end of the boat and carried on talking to him for days. Each morning I'd tell him to wake up, and sometimes I'd ask him how it felt to be dead, told Alvarenga. It was only on the 5th day that I came to my senses and asked myself, what am I doing talking to a corpse? Then I asked God to give me courage, said goodbye, and pushed his body over the side. So 36-year-old Alvarenga was now all alone and about to begin what was the longest period of solitude that anyone on a small boat has ever endured, adrift in the Pacific Ocean for 14 months. You may wonder how a tale of 438 days lost at sea can be made thrilling. Surely each day is much like the one before, right? This was not the case. José revealed details such as the devil urging him to slit his own throat and having to battle this voice in his head. José also came up with a sinister seagull soccer game that strangely saved his sanity. That's right, seagull soccer. José would capture seagulls to eat, and he would tear off their wings so they couldn't fly away, keeping them alive, hopping around the boat so the meat wouldn't spoil. He had as many as 8 or 10 sometimes, so his twisted mind developed a game where a round, dried fish was placed between the seagulls, and they'd all run around chasing it and kicking it about. He would name the birds after famous players, and then commentate the game for hours at a time. Finally, one day, Alvarenga crossed paths with a container ship. His luck had finally changed, or so he thought anyway. He frantically waved at them, but they simply waved back at him and never stopped. Why didn't they come to his aid? Did they really think he was just fishing in the middle of the ocean on a tiny boat? Was the container ship even really there? Salvation did finally come through on the 30th of January 2014. He spotted coconuts floating around his boat and birds landing around him, a sign that land was near. Alvarenga ended up washed ashore on the Eben Atoll, which is the southern tip of the Marshall Islands, one of the most remote spots on the planet. This was actually incredibly lucky. Had the currents taken him past this spot, the next likely stop for him would have been the Philippines, almost 5,000 kilometers further. As he reached the island, he jumped out of his boat, swam ashore, and discovered a house where he made contact with other humans for the first time in 438 days, and after traveling nearly 11,000 kilometers. After his rescue, Alvarenga flew back home to El Salvador, where he eventually wrote a book about his incredible journey and became a local celebrity. Cordoba's family, however, sued him, claiming José had probably eaten his fellow shipmate in order to survive. José has always denied these accusations, asserting that Cordoba had begged his captain not to eat his corpse, and his wishes were respected. There are still dark rumors about his almost unbelievable story, which range from Alvarenga being involved in a drug-running operation, to having made up all these details and even murdered Cordoba, and indeed resorted to cannibalism. Rumors aside, there's no doubt that José Alvarenga is a hero to survive such an ordeal. Sadly, he still hasn't entirely recovered from the harrowing experience. How do you think you would handle being lost at sea?